Dear students, good afternoon. Today we will be discussing about the development of CVS first. In this topic we will discuss about the development of heart and the related structures. Also we will discuss about the development of the conduction system, development of the different vessels, congenital cardiac defects, and fetal circulation will be discussed in the next topic. So for the today's topic, what we need to know, first of all, introduction, cardiogenic area, formation of the heart tube, divisions of the heart tube, looping of the heart tube, derivatives of different divisions of the heart tube, development of the various heart chambers, development of pericardium and pericardial cavity, development of cardiac septa, development of the heart valves. Now, introduction to CVS development. Development of heart and great vessels involve a complex sequence of events. Disruption of any portion of these events may lead to defects, which are known as congenital cardiac defects. Congenital cardiac defects account for most of the birth defects. Some are severe and some are mild, and prompt treatment needs early diagnosis and recognition of these defects. So CVS is the first system to function in the early embryonic life as early as in the third week because of the increasing demands of the nutritional demands of the embryo. Heart starts beating in the fourth week post-fertilization period. All the three layers of the heart develop from the splachnopleuric intraembryonic mesoderm. The heartbeat can be picked up by an ultrasound as early as the 8th week of gestation. So let us see what is this cardiogenic area. This is an area in the splachnopleuric intraembryonic mesoderm, cephalic to buccopharyngeal membrane. The cells of this area are arranged in a horseshoe-shaped manner, just below the summit of the coelom. Under the influence of underlying endoderm, these cells change into cardiac myoblasts. So what causes them to change into cardiomyoblasts? It is a factor secreted by underlying endoderm, which is known as BMP factor, which causes expression of the master gene for heart, which is known as NKX2.5. Other mesenchymal cells in this cardiogenic area form blood islands, from which the blood vessels and blood cells develop. So here what we see, this is an embryo, early period, as seen from the amniotic cavity. So here with this blue area, this is the neural plate. Below here we have the somitis. Here we have the midline of the neural plate, we have the neural groove. Just cephalic to that we have the buccopharyngeal membrane. Cephalic to that we have the cardiogenic area. This cardiogenic area lies just below the summit of the horseshoe cavity, that is the intraembryonic coelom, which will later on form the pericardium, and this red area is the cardiogenic area from which the heart develops. Now this heart develops initially in the form of a tube, which is known as the heart tube. So how this heart tube develops? The cells in the islands form blood vessels and blood cells. The blood vessels which are formed from the mesenchyme in the cardiogenic area, first of all, they join end to end to form two endothelial tubes surrounded by cardiac myoblasts. At the fourth week of the development, the enlarging brain pulls the buccopharyngeal membrane forwards, pushing the heart downwards, and then there occurs lateral folding. Because of that, the two heart tubes fuse. The fusion occurs in cephalocaudal direction. Fusion occurs as a result of lateral folding of the embryo. So what are in this diagram, what we see, this is the area, the embryo. There in the middle we have the neural plate. Just anterior to that we have the cardiogenic area. This is again arranged in the horseshoe shaped manner. These are the cells cardiogenic area. This is the basically intraembryonic splachnopleuric intraembryonic mesoderm. Here these are specialized cells which form the heart and the related structures. These are known as the cardiogenic cells. Now these cardiogenic cells undergo some transformation and form first of all two endothelial heart tubes. So first of all blood vessels are formed, which later on join together end to end on either side, say on the right side as well as on the left side, forming two heart tubes. Then because of the lateral folding, these two heart tubes join from cephalocaudal direction. That means these two heart tubes, they have an cephalic end and have a caudal end. So this joint fusion occurs cephalocaudal direction. Once they unite, the boundary between these two heart tubes disappears because of programmed condition that is called as programmed cell death. So these two heart tubes then join together to form a single chamber from above downwards. So above we have the cephalic and we have the arterial end or the outflow tract, and below the blue one we have the venous end or the inflow tract. Now if we do a section, transverse section in this, what we see a picture like this initially, while the cardiogenic, this is the initial stage where we have only the cardiogenic cells here. Later on they form the heart tubes on either side. This is the one heart tube, here one on the right side and another on the left side. Then there occurs folding of the embryo, lateral folding. Lateral folding, because of lateral folding, these two heart tubes join together to form a single heart tube. Now this single heart tube invaginates into the intraembryonic coelom, which later on form the pericardial cavity. So here we have the cardiogenic cells, here we have the two heart tubes, they have joined together to form the single heart tube. Now once these two heart tubes are joined, they are divided into different regions, which later on give rise to different parts of the heart. So cephalocaudally, the heart tube is divided into bulbus cordis, which further divide into truncus arteriosus, conus cordis, and bulbus cordis proper. We will see that later on. Primitive ventricle, then next we have the primitive atrium, then we have the sinus venosus. So in this diagram we will see the different, this is the heart tube which is formed as a result of fusion of the two individual heart tubes from cephalocaudally, that is from the above downwards. It is divided first of all into bulbus cordis, then we have the primitive ventricle, then we have the primitive atrium, then we have the sinus venosus. Now this bulbus cordis, the uppermost part, it is further divided into three parts. The uppermost will be called as the truncus arteriosus, from which the pulmonary trunk and the aorta develop. Then next we have the conus cordis, from which the outflow tracts of both the ventricles develop. Then we have the bulbus cordis proper, from which the right ventricle develop. And then we have the primitive ventricle, from which the left trabeculated part of the left ventricle develops. Then from the primitive atrium, the two atria develop. Then we have the sinus venosus, which has two horns, the right and the left horns, in which the various veins, embryonic veins, they enter. So again, coming back to these divisions of the heart tube, as already discussed that we have from above downwards, we have the bulbus cordis, primitive ventricle, primitive atrium, sinus venosus. So while we already discussed that the bulbus cordis is further divided into uppermost part, the truncus arteriosus, from which the outflow channels, that is the pulmonary trunk and the aorta develop. Then next we have the conus cordis, part of the bulbus cordis, from which develop the outflow tractus, and from bulbus cordis proper develops the primitive right ventricle, that is the trabeculated part of the right ventricle, not primitive part. Then we have the primitive ventricle. From the primitive ventricle develops the trabeculated part of the left ventricle. Then between the bulbus cordis and the primitive ventricle we have a groove, which later on forms the interventricular sulcus, because the bulbus cordis proper forms the right ventricle, while the primitive ventricle forms the left ventricle. So the groove, the constriction between them form the interventricular sulcus. Then we have the primitive atrium. This below primitive atrium we have the sinus venosus. This sinus venosus is, and we will discuss this later on. Now sinus venosus. This sinus venosus, what it is a venous channel formed by the joining of the different veins which enter into the inflow tract of the developing heart. These three veins, we have a common caudal vein. Then we have the common caudal vein is from the body wall of the embryo. So here we have the caudal vein. This is the anterior caudal vein and this is the posterior caudal vein. We will discuss them while we will discuss about the development of vessels, and they will join together on either side to form a main vein that is known as the common caudal vein. This common caudal vein will enter into the sinus venosus, while as from the yolk sac we have a vein which is known as the vitelline vein. This is the vitelline vein which will also enter into the venous end of the heart tube. And then we have from the umbilical cord we have the umbilical vein which also enters into the sinus venous end of the heart. So here in case of if we compare this heart tube with the first diagram, what we will see, the sinus venosus part. This is the sinus venosus part which is formed by joining of these different veins. So this is the common caudal vein which is pure, that's left and the right side. Similarly we have the vitelline vein that is also pure, right and left. Then we have the umbilical veins and then they are also pure, right and left. But most of these disappear. The left umbilical vein and the vitelline veins, they remain, while the right umbilical vein it disappears. So derivatives of the different regions of the heart tube. The truncus arteriosus gives rise to the pulmonary trunk and aorta. Now, as already discussed about that, Cons cordis forms the outflow tract of both the ventricles. Bulbus cordis proper, it forms the trabeculated right ventricle. Primitive ventricle forms the left trabeculated part of the left ventricle. Primitive atrium, it forms the atrial appendages. Anterior are the rough parts of both ventricles, atria, sorry. Then sinus venosus. Sinus venosus, what happens to the sinus venosus? The left horn of the sinus venosus, it obligates, almost obliterated, but it is remnant forms the oblique vein of the left atrium and the coronary sinus. So this point is very important. The left horn of the sinus venosus, it doesn't develop further, but it gets obliterated, and but what remains is the oblique vein of the left atrium and the coronary sinus. The right horn, it develops, it expands and forms the smooth part of the right atrium, which is known as the sinus venerum. Now looping of the heart. So this heart tube, what looping heart tube, first we will see that this heart loop is almost straight, having some constrictions. But what we see that the final position of the heart, it is acute as a result of the looping of the heart tube. So what is this looping of the heart tube? The dilatation and the subsequent bending of the heart tube is called a looping. So different regions of the heart tube, like the bulbus cordis, the primitive ventricle and the primitive atria, undergo dilatations and then subsequent bending, and that will be called as looping. So bulbus and the primitive ventricles move downward and anterior into right. Atrial end moves to left, up and posterior. Looping is the basis for the final shape and orientation of the heart. Error in looping will cause defects like what is known as dextrocardia. Normally the heart is tilted at its apex towards the left side. So whenever there is some defect in the looping, that means looping occurs in a reverse direction. It will cause the heart to tilt toward the right. It's called as dextrocardia. Now this is the final position of the heart, the shape of the heart. Here we have the heart, it is conical, having an apex. Then we have the right ventricle, which forms the most part of the anterior surface of the heart. Then we have the left ventricle, it forms a portion of the anterior surface of the heart, while as the right atrium, it forms the pulmonary surface of the heart, right pulmonary surface. then most of the left atrium is posterior. So this is the final shape, and this final shape is achieved as a result of the looping of the heart tube. So how this heart tube loops? So first of all, in these three features, this is first the initial shape of the this heart tube. The uppermost part, we have the blackish area. This is the truncus, the two divisions. Here we have the truncus arteriosus, then we have the conus cordis, and this green area is the bulbus cordis proper. Then the blue area is the primitive ventricle, then the reddish area is the primitive atrium, then below that we have the sinus venosus. Now what happens, there occurs some sort of bending and dilatations. So in bending and dilatation, what happens, the bulbus cordis and the primitive ventricle, they move downwards ventrally and to the right, while as the atria, they move upwards to left and posteriorly. So as later on, the definitive the final shape of the heart is achieved. So we see that the final shape of the heart is achieved as a result of the folding of the heart tube, the looping of the heart tube. Sorry. Now let's discuss about the development of the pericardial and the pericardial cavity and the pericardium. The developing heart tube invaginates into the crescent of the intraembryonic cilium. Since we see that the cardiogenic area where the heart tube is formed in the cephalic to buccopharyngeal membrane, they lie just below the summit of the intraembryonic cilium. So this heart tube invaginates into the intraembryonic cilium. The splenopleurocochlear form the visceral rear of the serous pericardium, while the somatopleurocochlear of the cavity forms the pericardium, parietal pericardium. The fibrous pericardium develops from the pleuropericardial folds, as we have already discussed it, along with the development of the pleura. The space between the parietal and visceral layers will form the pericardial cavity, which that will be the cavity of the hard tissue cavity of the intraembryonic cilium. The heart tube is attached to the dorsal wall of the cavity by means of dorsal mesocardium. There is no ventral mesocardium, remember, no ventral mesocardium. The dorsal mesocardium later disappears, which leads to formation of the transverse pericardial sinus. Now here what we can see, this is the heart, developing heart tube has formed over here, and it is in the pericardial cavity. Now here what we have, this arrow shows the dorsal mesocardium. The heart tube is attached to the posterior wall of the cavity by means of the fold, which is known as the dorsal mesocardium. Then here we have, this is the heart tube. Now here we have the pericardial cavity, black area. Now here what happens, that if we say this heart tube along with the pericardium has been taken out, here what we can see here is, now later on bending of this heart tube occurs, looping of the heart tube occurs. So because of this looping of the heart tube, here what we can say, this arrow shows the pericardial cavity. Now here this is the transverse pericardial sinus. Because of the disappearance of the dorsal mesocardium, the pericardial cavity of the two sides communicates with each other, which later on forms between the venous end and the arterial, and between the pulmonary trunk and the aorta, and posteriorly we have the venous portion of the heart. Now development of various heart chambers. Right ventricle trabeculated part from the bulbus cordis proper, left ventricle from primitive ventricle. The outflow tract of both ventricles develop from conus cordis. The bulboventricular constriction forms the interventricular sulcus. Right atrium, a rough part from the primitive atrium, while is the smooth part from the sinus venosus. Left atrium, rough part from the primitive atrium, while is the smooth part by the absorption of the pulmonary veins, that we will discuss later how it happens. Now here what we can see, that the development of the right atrium. Now here we have the adult heart, here we have the inside of the right atrium. The rough part is the pectinate muscles. Here we have the crista terminalis. This is the posterior smooth part. Here we have the fossa ovalis surrounded by a margin which is known as the limbus fossa ovalis. Here we have the opening of the inferior vena cava, which is guarded by a valve that is called the velo of the inferior vena cava. And just anterior to it we have the opening of the coronary sinus, which is again a valve that is known as the velo of the coronary sinus. Now here is the atrioventricular canal, right atrioventricular canal. This, and it has three cusps. This is the septal cusp, this is the posterior cusp, and then there will be the anterior cusp. Here in this area, this bluish area, here you can see small bluish area. There is a triangle of cork where we will find the AV node. Now this portion, the smooth part, it develops from the sinus venosus, this whole part, while as this rough part develops from the primitive atrium. Now development of the left atrium, you can see here we have the rough part here. Initially what happens on the posterior wall of the right atrium forms the pulmonary veins. Now these pulmonary veins, a single having two, first if this pulmonary vein divides into two, then each divides into further two divisions, and each of these two enter into the right and the left lung valves. There they make anastomosis with the veins within the lungs. But later on what happens that one of these left atrium enlarges, it absorbs portion of the pulmonary veins. So first instance it absorbs up to this area where it bifurcates. So there we will have two pulmonary. Initially we will have first in the initial stage we have one pulmonary vein opening into the left atrium. Later on, once it absorbs some portion of it, the place where it bifurcates, it will have then two openings. Then it will further go on absorbing, so that four pulmonary veins will enter into the right atrium, and the portion which has been incorporated into the right atrium will form the smooth part of the left atrium will form the smooth part of the left atrium. So we can just summarize the development of the left atrium is that the rough part develops from the primitive atrium, while the smooth part develops from the incorporation of the pulmonary veins. So this is the primitive left atrium. So this area is the blue area is the part which is smooth, which is developed from the pulmonary veins. Now this is the right ventricular chambers. So this rough portion of the right ventricle, this one, develops from the bulbous cordis. Now this outflow tract, this is the outflow tract of the left ventricle, the aorta. Here above we have the left ventricle. Here the section of the heart is in the coronal section of the heart has been done. So this outflow tract of the left ventricle, it develops from the what is known as the conus cordis. Similarly, we have the outflow tract of the right ventricle. This is area. It also develops from the conus cordis. So to summarize the development of the two ventricles, the rough portion of the right ventricle develops from the bulbous cordis proper. Rough portion of the left ventricle develops from the primitive ventricle, and outflow tracts of both ventricles, they develop from the conus cordis part of the bulbous cordis. So here we can see. Now here can be summarized like this. Again, this part is the conus cordis from which the outflow tracts of both ventricles have developed. The green part is the bulbous cordis proper, from which the rough part of the right ventricle is developed, and from the primitive ventricle the rough part of the left ventricle develops. So here we can see like this. To summarize the formation of the cardiac septa, we will take this diagram into consideration. The diagram shows the primitive heart with the primitive ventricular and the atrial chambers. The upper and the posterior ones, they are the atrial chamber, which is a single chamber, and the colored one shows the bulbous cordis and its spots, and also the primitive ventricle. In order to see the inside of the these chambers, we have to remove the various walls. First of all, we will remove the anterior wall of the conus cordis, the red one. So we will see a smooth area. This smooth area is the outflow, forms the outflow tract of both the ventricles. It leads into the truncus arteriosus. Then we will remove the anterior wall of the bulbous cordis, the green one. We will see the trabeculated area, from which the trabeculated part of the right ventricle develops. Then we will remove the anterior wall of the primitive ventricle. Again we will see a trabeculated area, from which the trabeculated part of the left ventricle develops. Then in this stage we will see an opening over here. This is the atrioventricular canal. Now this atrioventricular canal, it opens into the primitive ventricle. It doesn't communicate with the bulbous cordis because of this ridge, this curved ridge. This is known as the bulbar ridge. Now later on, cushioners develop, septum develop in this by formation of the endocardial cushioners, which divide this canal into the right and left atrioventricular orifices, and that septum will be called as the septum intermedium. Now in this diagram we will see the chambers. The upper one indicated by the blue area is the atrial chamber, and the lower one indicated by the red area is the ventricular chamber, and this green arrow shows the atrioventricular canal. This is the enteroventricular canal. Now with further development, endocardial cushioners develop on the wall of the atrioventricular canal. This is the superior atrioventricular cushion, and this is the inferior endocardial cushion on the atrioventricular canal. This we can also call as anterior and posterior cushions. Later on, these cushions fuse with each other, forming the septum intermedium, which will divide the atrioventricular canal into the right and left atrioventricular orifices. Similarly, cushions of endocardial cushions appear on the walls of the conus cordis and the pulmonary truncus arteriosus. The right and the left one. The right indicated by the black arrow, and the left one indicated by the green arrow. The right one grows up and to the left, while the left grows up and to the right. So once they fuse, they intertwine with, they twist with each other, forming a spiral septum. So because of this spiral septum, so this will form a spiral septum. So due to this formation of the spiral septum, the truncus arteriosus divides into the aorta and the pulmonary trunk, as a result of which the aorta arises from the left ventricle and pulmonary trunk arises from the right ventricle. Otherwise, if the septum formation in this area is straight, there will be transposition of the great vessels. The pulmonary trunk in that case would arise from the left ventricle, and the aorta would arise from the right ventricle. So this blue area indicates the opening into the pulmonary trunk, and the red area indicates the opening into the aorta. Now in this diagram, what we see, the septum formation has started. That the two cushions, these two cushions in the atrioventricular canal. Meanwhile, septum arises from the roof of the common atrial chamber. This is known as the septum primum. Now this septum primum, meanwhile another septum appears in the between the bulbous cordis and the primitive ventricle. This is muscular part of the interventricular septum. Now with further development, the endocardial cushions in the atrioventricular canal, they have grown towards each other, and they are almost about to fuse. So once they fuse, they form a complete septum that is now known as the septum intermedium. This septum intermedium divides the atrioventricular canal into right and left atrioventricular orifices. This is the right atrioventricular orifice, and this is the left atrioventricular orifice. The right atrioventricular orifice will now communicate with the bulbus cordis, and the left will communicate with the primitive ventricle. So the bulbar ridge has now disappeared over here. At this stage, the outflow of the blood will be like this. The outflow of the left ventricle, indicated by the red zigzag line, will go into the aorta, and that of the right ventricle, indicated by the blue zigzag line, will go into the pulmonary trunk. Now, what happens? In this diagram, the septum intermedium is complete, this septum. So the atrioventricular canal is now divided into left atrioventricular orifice, indicated by the red arrow, and the right atrioventricular canal, indicated by the this blue arrow. Then subsequently, the septum primum, this septum primum, it grows down towards the septum intermedium, and then it fuses with it like this. Once it fuses with it, its upper end, the upper part, degenerates by programmed cell death. Meanwhile, subsequently, another septum appears, this below one, on the right of the septum primum. This is known as the septum secundum. So at this stage, we can say that the septal formation in the atria is almost complete, except this area opening between the septum secundum and septum primum, indicated by this black arrow. This is the foramen ovale, which allows the blood flow from the right atrium to the left atrium, because the septum primum, it opens in one way, acting like a valve. So when after birth, the pressure in the left atrium becomes higher, it pushes this septum primum towards the septum secundum, thereby closing the foramen ovale, and it is represented in the postnatal life by the fossa ovalis. In some percentage of the cases, this foramen doesn't close. We can say that this that condition is called as patent foramen ovale. Meanwhile, the septum formation in the ventriculus is developing. The intermuscular septum has increased, and it has almost approached to the septum intermedium, but still there occurs a gap between the upper end of the intermuscular septum and the septum intermedium. This is the interventricular foramen, through which there is shunting of blood from the right ventricle to the left ventricle during fetal life. Like this, you can see. So indicated by this red arrow, there is shunting of the blood from the right ventricle into the left ventricle. Later on, this is closed by formation of the membranous septum, by the proliferation of the endocardial tissue from the septum intermedium and the septum, top of the septal interventricular septum. That is the membranous part of the interventricular septum. So when this is not completely fully formed, the membranous part, there will be a defect that is known as interventricular septal defect. Now at this stage, we can see that the septal formation, both the chambers, is complete and looking like a cross, and the integrity of the cross is an important sign to assess the development of the cardiac septa when seen by a UAG. And any part of, if this is missing, we can say that there is a particular septal defect. This is the limbus fossa ovalis. Now we will discuss about the development of the interventricular septum. The interventricular septum has two parts. Muscular part develops from the interventricular ridge. Membranous part develops from the proliferation of the endocardial tissue from the top of the muscular septum and the constitutions, and also the septum intermedium. So in this diagram, we have the adult heart here. We have the black arrow shows the muscular part of the interventricular septum. Then next we have here the yellowish arrow shows the membranous part of the interventricular septum. This membranous part of the interventricular septum is important because it contains the bundle this bundle of his, and it also separates three chambers, that is the right atrium from the left atrium and also the right atrium from the left ventricle. So this is also known as the strategic point of the heart. Now, how the septum formation takes place in the ventricles? First of all, appear the muscular ridge between the bulbus cordis and the primitive ventricle. Then there is endocardial tissue at its top, which proliferates, and also there occurs proliferation of the endocardial tissue from the septum intermedium and the conus cordis septum, which fills this gap between here, and which is initially a communication between the right ventricle and the left ventricle, which is known as the interventricular foramen. This interventricular foramen is closed by the membranous portion of the septum, which develops from the endocardial tissue from two sources, one from at the top of this muscular septum and also from the septum intermedium. So if this portion fails to develop, there occurs persistence of a foramen between the right ventricle and the left ventricle, that is known as interventricular septal defect. Here you can see it. The region of the cardiac septa has the appearance of a cross. If we see that it is like a cross, the interatrial and the ventricular septum, interventricular septum, it forms the bar, or what we call as the post of the cross, while as the septum intermedium forms the cross like this. So integrity of this cross is an important sign in the development of the heart by as we see in the ultrasound. If any portion of this cross is missing, say at a particular period of the gestation, say at 12 weeks, it should be presented here. So if it's not, any portion of it is absent at 12 weeks of gestation on ultrasound, we can say that there is some defect in the septum formation, either in the ventricles or in the atria, depending upon which portion of the cross is absent. Now, development of atrioventricular valves. The two atrioventricular orifices are surrounded by local proliferation of mesenchymal tissues. This tissue is thinned by the hollowing out of the bloodstream. The mesenchymal tissue thus form the AV valves. The valves are attached to the ventricular walls by muscular cords. The muscular cords degenerate and are replaced by dense connective tissue. So here what we can see here, we have the AV valves, which are connected to papillary muscles by means of the chordae tendineae. Now initially what we have the common chamber head, we see that here we have the below we have the primitive ventricular this chamber, above we have the atrial chamber, and here between here we have the atrioventricular canal, and here we have some on their lateral walls of these atrioventricular canals. We have the local proliferation of the mesenchymal tissue, but here develops the septum intermedium, which divides it into the right and left side. But on the right and the left wall, that on the lateral walls, we have the local proliferation of the mesenchymal tissue. Now it becomes thinned out because of the blood stream which is jetted from the ventricles towards the atria. It becomes it gets thinned out. So it forms the basis of the valves or the AV valves, and they are connected with the ventricular walls by the muscular cords. Later on, these muscular cords they degenerate and they are replaced by fibrous cords which form the chordae tendineae. Now, development of semilunar valves. The semilunar valves appear as tubercles on the inferior margin of the truncal swellings. A third swelling appears opposite those derived from the truncal swelling. Thus, the semilunar valves are derived as under the aortic valves. There are three: the left leaflet from the left truncal ridge, the right leaflet from the right truncal ridge, posterior leaflet from the third tubercle, which appears in the channel wall of the channel. Pulmonary valves appears in the same manner. The left leaflet from the left truncal ridge, right leaflet from the right truncal ridge, anterior leaflet from the anterior wall of from the third tubercle, which appears on the anterior wall of the channel. So here what we can see that normal these valves. This is the pulmonary valves. This is the aortic valve, and here we have the bicuspid and the tricuspid valves. Now here what we can see that in these diagrams, this second diagram, first we have the heart tube. It undergoes looping, forming the right ventricle, primitive right ventricle, and the left ventricle. Then this is the outflow tract. This is the truncus arteriosus. This truncus arteriosus then divides into the pulmonary trunk and the pulmonary trunk and the aorta by means formation of the spiral septum. Then at the lower edge of the spiral septum, these tubercles appear like these tubercles. Then these tubercles, they meet with each other, dividing these openings into pulmonary and the aortic. Then another swelling appears opposite to these truncal swellings, one here and another here, so thereby forming three valves on either side, which have semilunar shape, forming the semilunar valves. Now, development of the conducting tissue of the heart. The conducting tissue of the heart develops from the cardiac myoblastus, which becomes specialized. The pacemaker initially lies on the caudal part of the left heart tube. There, the heart tube, lower end of the heart tube, where we have the sinus venosus, which later on form the right atrium. On its left wall, we have the initial pacemaker situated, which later on form the SA node. Once the sinus venosus is incorporated in the right atrium, it lies near the opening of the superior vena cava. The AV node and the bundle of the His develop from the specialized cells in the left wall of the sinus venosus and the AV canals respectively. So here this is the normal conducting tissue. Here we have the AV node, which lies on the right atrium just near the opening of the superior vena cava. Here we have the AV node, then here we have the bundle of His, then we have the right and left bundle, and then we have the Purkinje fibrils. This is the heart tube initially once it has started looping, and it is caudal end. This is the caudal end. This is caudal end, where we have the sinus venosus. The initial pacemaker is over here. Here it will then later on, once it gets incorporated into the right atrium, because it forms the smooth part of the right atrium, where the superior vena cava also open. So it will form the SA node. Similar tissue on this area, AV canals here, near here in the right atrium on the left wall, it will form the AV node. So this is all for today. The rest we will discuss in the next class.